Hello everyone, I just wanted to make a quick video to talk about the concept of lengthening cycles and diminishing returns in Bitcoin. And if you're not familiar, this was popularized by the YouTuber Benjamin Cohen. Pretty good quantitative analysis. I definitely recommend checking him out. But the question is basically about the Bitcoin cycles, which are dominated by the Bitcoin halving, and just looking at historical data kind of proves the case in and of itself, right? Like here we have cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3 in relation to the bottom, and I think it's pretty self-evident just by looking at this type of chart that we are getting lesser rewards, lesser gains, let's say, and that it's taking a longer time to do it, right? These are days right here on the bottom. So I think the evidence for lengthening cycles is pretty solid. And again, Ben himself has a couple of videos where he provides all the different evidence for it. But I want to do this video to provide a couple of different theoretical arguments as to why this theory must be true. And maybe I want to challenge some of the underlying assumptions that go into not accepting the theory. So, for example, maybe you think that there's a de-acceleration of Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is slowing down. And that actually is not the case because of the power of exponential growth. Okay. So I want to possibly just reframe a few concepts and just provide some more arguments that are out there in the public sphere about how we can think about this. But specifically, I want to argue that lengthening cycles and diminishing returns, they kind of must be true. Almost like the laws of physics don't allow an alternative, right? And this is similar to the concept of evolution, that, originally we thought of evolution as a theory that applies in specific cases, to organisms. But the more you think about it and learn about it, you realize, hey, as long as there's variation and as long as there's a selection process, evolution will occur. So it's not limited to just living organisms, but networks evolve, cultures evolve, even ideas evolve, right? As long as there's variation and selection, there is going to be evolution. And here I'm going to argue that as long as there is this level of exponential growth, we are going to get de-acceleration, okay? So ultimately, this is really a video about the power of exponential growth and how most things we're used to in the real world seem to go linearly and our imaginations go linear. When you go quadratic, or even more so exponential, as we see here on the blue line, things increase very quickly, very rapidly, okay? So I want to use two examples. There's an old Indian fable and also a gaming system that can help us visualize the problem here with exponential growth and how often we don't think about it properly, okay? So this is an old story. A lot of you are probably going to be familiar, but it's the idea behind the guy who invented chess. He presented it as a gift to a king, and the king was so grateful that he allowed the inventor to choose any prize that he wanted. And famously, the legend goes that the inventor said, okay, give me 1 grain of rice for the first square, 2 grains of rice for the second square, 4 grains of rice for the third, and so on. Just keep doubling it. And that the king quickly accepted because, of course, he couldn't imagine the power of exponential growth. And sure enough, as you start seeing here in the image, the numbers start getting very big when you're just doubling and doubling and doubling. And very quickly, we look at this chart, we see that before we're halfway through the board, we're already talking about billions of grains of rice per square. And the numbers really do get ridiculously big. I kind of geeked out a little bit preparing for this video. So just for fun, this last square right here would have 9 quintillion grains of rice, which based on the estimate of how many grains of rice are in a ton of rice, that's 252 billion tons of rice, which again doesn't mean anything to you or me because we don't even know how many tons of rice are out there. So to put it in context we can understand, the entire modern world today, every country combined, makes about 500 million tons of rice a year, okay? So that means that it would take the entire world, every single country, about 500 years at the current production just to fill this last square, with the required grains of rice. So, of course, the story goes once the king realized that there's no way that he could pay it, he just had the inventor beheaded. So, the legend, I guess, is about exponential growth and also not being too clever for your own good. So, but speaking of being too clever for your own good, um, there's another interesting example about the power of exponential growth and how we can be fooled into not respecting it enough. Okay, so there's a betting system called the martingale system, and it was developed in France back in the 17th century. And when you first stumble upon it, it's easy to think that it is an unbeatable system, that it's a guaranteed system to win. Why? Essentially, what the system tells you to do is you make a bet. Let's say the bet is $10. And if you win, you won $10. Great. Now bet again. But if you lose, you just double the next bet, right? So you bet 10, now you make it 20. That way, if you win, you not only win the current 10, but you win the last one. So if you lose the second bet, you just double that, right? So you bet 20, now you're going to bet 40. And if you win that bet, you're going to make the 20, the 10, and an extra 10. And now you can restart and go back to 10. So the idea is you could just keep doubling until you win and then restart at 10. Keep doubling until you win and then restart at 10. And you will always make money, okay? So what is the problem with this strategy? Well, what ends up happening is people underestimate how likely it is to go through a bad run. And this system, just like the chess story, is making you double the investment every time that you lose. So here, this guy started here, for example, with 10. He loses 10. Now he's got to bet 20. Now he's got to bet 40. Now he's got to bet 80. He loses 10 hands in a row or 10 flips in a row or 10 roulette wheels in a row, whatever you can imagine. Well, now he's already 10K in. And this strategy always ends up looking like this, right? It's a guaranteed way to make money. And here you could see all of these losing events where he had to double, double, double. Oh, but he made all his money back. Double, double, double. Oh, he made all his money back. The problem is that inevitably, he's going to hit a bad streak of cards or a bad run of the dice, and he's going to lose 12, 13, 15 hands in a row. And just like the grains of rice on the chessboard, the numbers get big. And the only way to survive this is if you had an infinite bankroll. Nobody has an infinite bankroll. So just like the king thought that he could pay any amount of grains of rice, the gambler thinks, hey, even if I have $1 million and I'm only betting $1 a hand, then martingale would work. Nope. Your chart would still end up looking like this because you're underestimating the power of exponential growth. Okay? So let's get to Bitcoin, which is really at the core of it. Most people that are following the Bitcoin price are familiar with this idea that we've had these exponential growth based on the Bitcoin cycles around the halving of Bitcoin. And it really has been exponential growth. There's different ways to look at this chart. This is another cool one that shows you, like just how quickly it jumped up. The data for this first epoch is hard to get, So this was when Bitcoin was more popular. So we're going to be looking at these two events right here. After the first halving and after the second halving, or epoch 2 and 3 as they're listed here, okay? And if we look at these cycles, okay, what we know is that in the first cycle, towards the end on that last year in 2013, from January to December, this is kind of arbitrary. I'm trying to pick numbers that we can compare, okay? It's not the exact bottom. Trying to match it more or less to the exact top, but the specific dates you pick don't matter because this is a bigger concept, okay? This is just about the raw power of exponential growth, okay? So we went from $13 to $1,156 in that 2013 cycle. So that was an 86 times increase in the price of Bitcoin. 86x return on your money, 8,600%. And the market cap of Bitcoin, this is the fully diluted market cap. Again, we're just multiplying by 21 million to make our lives easy, okay? And the growth here was $24 billion, okay? So $24 billion in total monetary value was sucked in by Bitcoin. In order to pull this off, in order to go from $13 to $1,156 Bitcoin, the network had to grow in this 1 year period, about 336 days, the network had to grow by $71 million a day. That's one way that we can visualize it. $71 million a day went into the network, okay? Now, cycle 3 in 2016, towards the end of that last year, was when we had that blow off when we were at about $1,000 at the beginning of the year. And we blew up all the way up until 20,000. This is the one most of you will remember or live through. And what you can see here is that even though the increase was only 20x, right? Here we only went 20 times our money compared to this previous cycle. But look at the difference. Because the Bitcoin market cap was already so large, when we multiplied this, the growth was $400 billion. Bitcoin grew $400 billion in market cap during this period. So to meet this reduced return, right, diminished returns right here in the same amount of time, we had to grow by $1.1 billion per day. So the growth here, even though we are significantly less, about four times less in, let's say, investment return, the network had to grow 16 times more quickly per day. 16 times more money was going into Bitcoin per day in order to get this correlation right here. And we can already see where this is going, because like the chessboard or like the martingale system, what you see is that when we're going exponential, when we're going quadratic, right here, you can see if we're just squaring it, it gets bigger. That's like the doubling. But really, we're looking at this one here, because we're talking about growing 86 times your money or 20 times your money. So you can just imagine how massive the numbers get. And that's the real question. So now we're looking at this cycle. Let's extrapolate a little bit and understand the impossibility of maintaining the same rate, okay? If cycle 4 for Bitcoin, the one that we're currently in, if we count this last year, let's say from January when Bitcoin was at 30K, and gave it around those 340 days around the same time to go to December, okay? If we wanted to have similar growth to cycle 2, if we wanted to go up 86x, then by December, Bitcoin would have to be at $2.5 million, as Ben has pointed out in his channel. And the market cap would have to grow by $52 trillion. $52 trillion. Now, this is really important for perspective, okay? The market cap of gold is $10 trillion only, all right? And the market cap of the S&P 500 is 38 trillion. So that means that the market cap of Bitcoin would be more than all of gold and more than every company in the S&P 500, all of it combined. And the daily growth required would have to be $150 billion a day, would have to be pouring into Bitcoin. It's like, that's an insane amount of growth, seriously, when you think about it, because 150 billion, I mean, Apple is a $2.3 trillion company. So at this rate, every 15 days, the entire value of Apple would be sucked in by Bitcoin. And that's really like the point that we have to understand. The numbers are getting so big that now we're really talking about the biggest companies in the world, one of the biggest assets in the world, like gold. It's been accelerating so much that it's becoming physically impossible. There's not enough money in the system. There's not enough value that can be sucked up by Bitcoin at these increasing rates, right? And even if we only 20x instead of 86x, if this cycle was just like the last cycle, we're kind of in a similar situation. It would be $11 trillion in growth. So we would still have all of the gold market cap getting sucked in by Bitcoin. Bitcoin would be at $500,000. And the growth per day is $35 billion is what it would be required. Every single day, $35 billion rushing into Bitcoin. If we go look at Coin Market Cap or CoinGecko, there's not even that many projects that are above $35 billion. There's maybe like 8, 9, 10 right now because the market's been tanking. You can see right here, 35. Look at this cutoff right here. Polkadot is under $35 billion right now. So every single day we would lose one of these coins and it would get completely sucked up by Bitcoin. And it would not be enough. Look, we're already dropping to 13 billion. Okay. So the pace of growth is literally physically impossible, I believe. And if not now, this cycle, then it would certainly be by the next cycle at the pace that we're going. Just like the grains of rice, right? Just like the martingale system, you know, you can't outsmart it. It's going to double too much. So there's no other way to conceive of this. So what are some more realistic expectations? Well, if we only went up at 5 times, if we only 5x from the last time instead of 20x, Bitcoin is still growing 6 times faster. So that's the last kind of point I really want to drill in. Diminishing returns, lengthening cycles, does not mean that Bitcoin is slowing down. As a matter of fact, it could speed up 6x, right? The growth per day, 6 times more money per day could pour into Bitcoin, and we could still only 5x, right? So when we think about diminishing returns and when we think about lengthening cycle and the alternatives, if people are telling you about super cycles and all this stuff, I'm as a big a crypto bull as anybody else, but the laws of physics are the laws of physics, and the laws of mathematics are the laws of mathematics. So I think that there's really no other way to conceive of this. Lengthening cycles and diminishing returns must be true for any asset class, assuming that it can continue to gain growth. No asset class will be able to just continually exponentially increase their growth or even maintain exponential growth. It's just not possible.